According to the census in 1940, Tucson, Arizona had a population of 35,752. At a time long before supermarkets were a part of this burgeoning community, 109 family-run Chinese grocery stores served many of the city's neighborhoods and barrios during the 1940s.
But Tucson was a very important hub of Chinese family and community interaction, basically because they created community with local Mexicans for the most part. And in that way, they sort of militated against harsh exclusion laws, segregation, and racism by creating this very, very significant niche with Mexicans in Tucson.
In addition to canned goods, vegetables, and meats, the grocery stores prepared what came to be known as Chinese chorizo, a version of Mexican chorizo, an essential ingredient for most Hispanic households at the time.
Here in Tucson, we have something called Chinese chorizo, which is an early example of food fusion, what we would call today food fusion. And unlike today, what we have with Chinese chorizo is that the ingredients and the people who made this sausage were really wrought out of close neighborhood relationships. And so the ingredients of Chinese chorizo are not so much different as that of Mexican chorizo, except the Chinese grocers who had meat and beef in their grocery store and who also sold Hispanic spices, ingredients, etc., made this chorizo, and they called it Chinese chorizo.
Both Chinese and Mexican chorizo trace their roots back to Spanish chorizo. Unlike their relative from Spain, both Mexican and Chinese chorizo use chili spice in place of the more expensive and harder to find smoked Spanish paprika, vinegar or red wine in place of white. And both Mexican and Chinese chorizo are prepared and sold in bulk rather than in casings.
Well, my brother usually made the chorizo, and it was usually like, you know, the end cuts that you would throw away. It would go in the chorizo, or the fat off when you trim the meat. All that would go in, and he would make it pretty hot too, because the chili was so hot that he wore out a pan that he was making it in. It actually like acid, would eat through it, and he had to get another pan because it actually eat a hole through the pan, the chili would. But he had customers all around that really. He had a lady that came from New Jersey, and she would buy like 10 pounds of it and freeze it to take it clear back to New Jersey, because she says you can't find anything like this back east,
My memory is chorizo is that when I started, there was only one kind of chorizo, the mild chorizo. And like they say, the reason for the chorizo is that use all the leftovers, everything. And people would complain and say, oh, you throw everything into it. But you sell so much of it that there isn't. And I don't know when I started, but when I started with hot chorizo, that was a windfall. Because now we had to buy a big grinder. we couldn't use a little grinder because we sold tons of the stuff.
Same thing like Howard's dad would do, or Howard's brother. But the thing, I always ask my dad, you don't even have a recipe. He goes, no, because it depends on what you have left over. You kind of know you're going to put this much chili. You kind of know these kind of meats. But there was no recipe, because one day it could be more lunch meat, or another day more pork in it, or, combination. So there was really no recipe, because when the neighborhood people go, oh, you grind it up, you have it there. Oh, it's really good, Alan, today. They'd come back and get more, and then what's it like the following week? So there was no recipe at my dad's store.
Well, the chilies was usually those that you see hanging that people use for decorations. They'd buy that, and you just soak it and get it, soft, and then that would be the main chili that would be in the chorizo, plus chili powder and stuff.
I don't know how I came about it, but I started, it was so tremendous. It's just overwhelming, And the other ingredient that we would buy is boneless meat, but it was too expensive. So in order to keep the price down, we're trying to figure out, they were selling beef tongues you won't believe it, were very reasonable. So we'd use up all the packet didn't have enough meat tons to sell us. So we didn't know how to keep up with it. So I had to think of something, and this one packer had sold these jumbo bolognas. They were about 6 or 8 foot long. And said, let's try the bologna. And boy, that was a solver. I didn't want to do it, but hey, it's bologna and it's edible. So we sold tons of chorizo, and we didn't do it like they were saying because to use the pods takes too long. So we went to the powdered chili. Even though it's powdered, it's so hot that you couldn't mix the chorizo with your hands, it would burn. We had to use heavy gloves because it was just a big production.
I remember my dad, everyone had a walk-in box. So the meat would be hanging in there, the hind quarter or the front quarter.
Or you, if you were bad. I would have been hooked on there before, so.
Yeah, my dad he probably was weighed barely as much as the quarters of meat that he was bringing out, because he only weighed like 90 pounds. And I remember hauling this thing out, and he put on a big butcher block, and he cut every piece of meat, with just a knife and a handsaw through the bone and everything, and all the different cuts would just be him cutting it.
You don't know, because you have pork ends, you have beef ends. You might throw in chicken parts, so you just didn't want to waste anything.
You couldn't tell the difference. I'll tell you the difference. One day my brother shot 5 of those, what is it, those pigs?
Javelinas?
The javelinas.
Oh, no,
He didn't know
the
what to do
javelini.
with them. And I said, I know what we can do with them.
put
We
it in
made
the chorizo.
You can't tell the difference. The chili is so hot. How can you tell what it is?
Recipe for 60 pounds of Chinese chorizo. First, 55 pounds of beef trim. Next, 10 pounds of pork fat. Add 5 pounds of bologna, hot dogs, and other assorted luncheon meats. 12 heads, not cloves, of garlic. 2 1/2 bottles of cheap red wine. 2 cups mild chili powder. 1 cup hot chili powder. 8 ounces of ground oregano. 1 pound pre-soaked dried chili pods. Add all ingredients and grind in a large commercial grinder. Mix together by hand. Be sure to wear heavy-duty rubber gloves.